Members' business debate on motion 5607 in the name of Stuart McMillan on Greenock&Inverclyde faced with higher forecourt prices than the rest of Scotland. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I invite members who wish to participate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. I call on Stuart McMillan to open the debate for around 7 minutes. Mr McMillan.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First of all, I'm pleased to have secured this members' debate. I'd like to thank colleagues from across the Chamber for supporting it to allow this to happen. I also want to thank Daniela Tice from the Greenock Telegraph and India Grant from the BBC's Scotland's The 9 programme for reporting their campaign to get local fuel retailers to stop ripping off the people of Inverclyde. Oil prices can be volatile and always will go up and down and have become even more unpredictable since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. However, Tesco, Morrisons and BP have been ripping off my constituents since long before the war in Ukraine. The three companies continually claim that, and I quote, local competition is the driver for local fuel prices. Using their logic, that surely then if one of them chooses to drop the prices, then competitors would actually follow suit. Yet they don't. The greed is good mantra clearly exists with Tesco, Morrisons and BP when it comes to the swindling of my community. I've attempted to engage with all three suppliers over many years, and I acknowledge that Morrisons did accept that their prices were too high a few years ago, and they reduced them. That decrease has long since evaporated. I asked representatives from all three companies to come to Inverclyde to take part in a round-table discussion with interested organisations, including the Chamber of Commerce. All three refused. I've also written to the Competition Markets Authority and welcome their market study that is underway. It's just a pity that the CMA didn't initiate such a review when I first wrote to them a few years ago. I launched my Fair Fuel Watch campaign to highlight the cheapest garage locally in comparison to the cheapest garage in surrounding areas. This generated a huge amount of discussion on social media, and people took photos of the cheaper prices at other garages to emphasise the extent of this unfairness. And my constituents are furious, knowing that forecourts in Dunoon tend to be significantly cheaper than those in Inverclyde, despite the fact that the tankers have to drive through my constituency, go on a ferry to cross the Clyde to actually service those forecourts. Now, we even have fuel cheaper in Fairley in North Ayrshire, and once again the tankers drive through Inverclyde to supply those garages. Since launching the campaign, it's become clear that garages in Inverclyde are consistently around 5 to 10 pence per litre more expensive than nearby areas. And recent figures from the petrolmap.com website indicates that Inverclyde's forecourts are now the most expensive in Scotland. Most colleagues would normally consider that petrol stations in the Highlands and Islands, including your own, Presiding Officer, in Orkney, would be more expensive. The proof is there, though, that Inverclyde is now the most expensive in Scotland for fuel. When we consider that Inverclyde has the second highest local share of data zones in the 15% most deprived and the highest local share of data zones in the 5% most deprived in Scotland, the issue becomes even more scandalous. Then you add in the enormous profits that the oil companies are making. Between April and June of this year, the world's 5 biggest oil companies shared bumper global profits of nearly £50 billion, with BP reporting a global profit of £6.9 billion, its biggest quarterly profit in 14 years. These eye-watering profits come as households face unmanageable energy bills, and reports from the BBC suggest that weekly road fuel prices in the UK have almost doubled since 2016. And it's not just fossil fuel companies that are profiting during the cost of living crisis. Tesco reported profits of £2.56 billion for 2021-22, up by 65.5% compared to the previous year. And for 2022-23, Tesco expects its retail-adjusted operating profit to be between £2.4 billion and £2.6 billion. Morrisons have reported a decline in profits, but still managed to make £254 million of an operating profit in 2020-2021. Interestingly, Asda reports profits of £693.1 million for 2021, up 42% compared to 2020, and their forecourts are typically the cheapest of all the supermarkets in Scotland. While not wishing to simplify the financial accounts of these big supermarkets, I believe that these figures show that they can offer lower fuel prices and continue to make profits. They just need the will. Many of my constituents travel to Govan or Linwood to fuel up at Asda or the Jet Garage in Renfrew because they are so much cheaper many decide to do their weekly shop whilst outside of Inverclyde. This highlights how cheaper fuel prices also translates into customer loyalty and deciding where to buy groceries. And who knows, if Tesco and Morrisons in my constituency actually reduced their fuel prices to make them more competitive, they might actually have more customer loyalty when it comes to grocery shopping. Presiding Officer, I want to highlight the experience of two of my constituents. A lady who has received a terminal cancer diagnosis contacted me recently about the cost of fuel. She is filling up outside of Inverclyde when attending specialist appointments in Glasgow. She wants to remain independent and travel to and from appointments herself. And further, with her condition, it makes sense, where possible, to travel in isolation, as COVID is still here. She went on to tell me about a friend who is in a similar situation, but in her case, she has already cancelled appointments as she cannot always afford to put fuel in her car. How can it be right that cancer patients are cancelling appointments because they cannot afford the rip-off petrol prices that Tesco, Morrisons and BP are charging in Inverclyde? The stock answer of being competitive locally didn't wash before, and it's viewed with even more disdain with every single passing day. Now, these companies have the power to help these two women, as well as many other local people locally. They can keep people fuelling up in Inverclyde as compared to folk going 50 miles up the road to put fuel in their cars. Now, I've also previously raised the issue of how social care workers and social workers rely upon their own transport to visit people in their homes, and how rising fuel costs are eating into their already squeezed incomes. And that's why I'm calling on fuel retailers in Inverclyde to cut their forecourt prices immediately. Tesco say that, and I quote, "Every little helps." And their current Christmas campaign, they stand for joy this Christmas. And customers can apparently find, and I quote, "more ways to save with Morrisons." So why don't they stop ripping off Inverclyde and lower the pump prices in my constituency? Presiding Officer, I'm going to use the duck test. I'd say if it acts like a cartel, talks like a cartel and rips off my constituents like a cartel, I think that says it all. Thank you.